Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming, and part 2 of how to build an accursed city of darkness by night. I think that's what we called part 1. I didn't actually go back and check. This video was from last month. There's been a lot of videos coming out over the last month, as I hope you appreciate. You know, a new video every weekday. That's quite a work rate. And why am I pursuing this work rate? Viewers, listeners? Well, the reason is quite simple. This writer needs your support. Not only do I want you to pick up the games that I keep talking about, The World Below, Curseborne, they came from the RPG anthology, I would also love for your patronage. If you have a few spare dollars, and I know not everyone does, or pounds, or euro, or whatever your currency of choice happens to be, do check out patreon.com/Matthew Dawkins, or do check out MatthewDawkins.com, because there is a direct PayPal link there. I'm not asking for donations for money. This is only if you can afford to and only if you want to, and specifically if you want to request a video. Feel free to send me some money, and if you don't want to do that, perfectly fine. I'll keep creating content regardless, I'm sure. But the other way, of course, is you pick up a game that I am currently promoting. So get yourself a game and get a video, essentially, for free. I'm particularly favouring those who buy The World Below, or they came from the RPG anthology right now. You do either of those things, you contact me through MatthewDawkins.com, you let me know, send me evidence of your purchase, and I will create a video of your choice. Obviously, you may request something utterly bizarre, and I'll say, yeah, we may not be able to do that, but let's do this instead, and we can talk about it. Point being, I'm making these videos for you because people seem to be enjoying them, but it also takes a certain amount of time. I enjoy them, but I do need occasionally see people buying the books I'm working on, or just topping up my very lukewarm bank account. All that aside, how to build an accursed city of darkness by night. We did part 1, which was on themes, tones, and locations in a city. And this is part 2, and part 2 is about characters. Now, of course, there are a couple of reasons why you're going to want to inhabit your world with characters. One, because it's not going to be an empty, blasted, asteroid-impacted world. I guess it could be. That's a very different kind of game. And 2, because you need characters for your player characters to interact with. NPCs are a vital part of the role-playing game experience for me, because there's a lot of RPGs out there that very much emphasize things like interacting with the environment, just slaying monsters, grabbing treasure, overcoming traps, and so on. Unless those games also encourage player characters to interact with each other consistently, asking each other about their pasts, about their aspirations, about why they did that, who their loved one is back home, and so on, you're going to be playing a game that's heavy on the dice rolling and very low on the character journey. And so NPCs, especially in a game like Curseborne or a World of Darkness or Chronicles of Darkness game, or even The World Below for that matter, should constantly have NPCs in the background, or SGCs as they are in story path games. People sometimes ask me, how do they exist in The World Below? The World Below is practically post-apocalyptic. Well, when it isn't the calm season, there are a lot of people ranging throughout the world below. So there's a lot of characters you can interact with, and not all of them are going to be hostile. Most of them are just minding their own business. But if it comes to exchanging information about the way ahead or behind, exchanging goods and tools and so on, the world below provides, and these SGCs exist to help populate the world and give it more flavour. Characters are essential for that. Now, a role-playing game isn't just about giving a location, a setting, a city character. It's about giving the characters purpose and an enjoyable role-playing experience for the players. But I will say this, NPCs are often best, most striking and important when they have a connection to a player character. So this is point 1. This is the first way you can create your NPCs to give a location meaning, give a city a building block. I will give you an example from a Vampire the Requiem chronicle I am running presently. We have a character in that chronicle by the name of let's go for Cleo. because Cleo has, for the most part, been living in a basement of a community centre, unliving in a community basement, while her sire has off and disappeared. And she's still getting out and getting up to adventures with the rest of the coterie, but in a very recent session, she encountered an old classmate from her high school. And by introducing this classmate with the "wow, I've not seen you in years, you haven't aged a day," the typical vampire mortal interaction talk, what it does is immediately provide the character some kind of purchase, a way of looking back at their history, but a way of framing the present in a modern context. So, for example, this character is now going to be able to say, "Do you remember this person and what happened to them?" They're going to be able to say things like, "Why did you move away from our hometown?" But they're also going to have a mystery surrounding them. Why are they currently here in the domain? Are they here to harass our player character? Did they seek them out with a purpose? Is it just a fated coincidence that's going to end very, very badly? What was their relationship like when they were at high school? Were they friends, or is this one of those cases where it's an old school bully that's coming up to you and pretending that you were the best of mates, but the only memory you have in your mind is how this girl used to torment you incessantly? There's lots of ways you can play this. Now, in our Vampire the Requiem Chronicle, they got on pretty damn well up until the mortal NPC died horribly and was turned into a zombie pretty horribly again. I mean, she's technically, as of the last game we played, not destroyed. She is still a rampaging zombie in Trump Hotel in Vegas. But the relationship ended poorly. And what she brought to the game, and adding colour to the city, was she brought a small town outside element, because that game is set in Vegas. She was a tourist, whereas our player character, Cleo, is now effectively a resident of Las Vegas. We have another character who works and runs a massive blood trafficking, blood bank organisation, which is legitimate on the face of it. And one of the characters that she knows, a mortal but a ghoul, is her mother, because this player character is a Dhampir. And therefore a Dhampir has a mortal parent and an undead parent. So her father is a vampire, her mother is a ghoul, and her mother effectively runs this blood trafficking organization. Now, by having a mortal contact in such a place, it tells us several things about the setting. One, nepotism exists, because our player character is also, if not the CEO, the COO of this company. She plays a part in running it with her mother. Two, it also implies something about gender politics in this world. Unless the father figure, the vampire, put her here, it is quite possible for a woman in this world to run a major business. Another thing, it tells us something about their relationship. Not only do they work together, but also the mother is superior. There's a succession level of dynastic dispute there. It's not quite as convoluted. There aren't lots and lots of siblings. But the relationship, while not affectionate, you could probably assume that the mother would sacrifice everything to protect her daughter. She would never express that in words. She probably wouldn't express that with a hug. She's very exacting and expects an awful lot from her daughter. But she is doing all of this for her daughter, so that her daughter can live the best possible life possible for a vampire, or Dhampir in her case. All of this adds flavour. I try to have every single character in my mind in a game have 3 NPCs attached to them, and I try to have them all from different walks of life. Now, they don't all appear in the first session. I don't always tell the players what these characters are going to be. The whole point is they all come in from different angles at different points of the game to illustrate another part of the setting, to illustrate another part of the plot, the city, what have you. So, for example, with our Dampier here, we have her mother who works in the blood bank. That is arguably a positive relationship. We have another character who is trying to buy out or sabotage, undermine the blood bank for outside interests, a foreign conglomerate of vampires, you could say, which implies there's a lot of business rivalry that takes place in this domain. And then we have a neutral character. So we have a positive, a negative, and a neutral. Someone who she will come to know, come to use as a contact. There is a doorman at the strip club, one of the strip clubs. We spoke about the Titty Bar in my Giving Locations character video a couple of weeks ago. Well, they know each other now. Not well, but well enough that she's going to basically be asking this character for aid, potentially, in future, and he's going to recognize her on the street. So you create this web. In Vampire the Masquerade, they use coterie charts, of course. This almost goes beyond a coterie chart. This becomes a massive mind map of interconnected characters. But by basically introducing a character and being able to say the location they can be found at and the location that is interesting to them, what that character's objectives are, those are about the only 3 things you need to note. You have added an increasing depth to the setting. By having one character be connected to an actor in the city and another character in their life being a down-and-out, drug-addicted nephew, for example. That implies something about the maybe criminal elements of the city. And another be their landlord, someone who just wants the rent paid on time, but maybe just keeps hiking it up and up and up. All of these things tell you something about the city. And none of this at all gets into the supernatural aspect of playing a game like Curseborne or Vampire the Requiem. We haven't even spoken about princes and primogen and sheriffs and things like that, because that's a different level entirely. And I'm not entirely sure that having a fully fleshed out hierarchy of vampires in a city gives it character. I think rather that provides a kind of superstructure that works for a game like Vampire the Masquerade, but isn't necessarily essential for your player character's journeys. So we've formulated each character's own orbit with a positive, a neutral, and a negative attitude relationship. So let's look at the supernatural hierarchy. I'll keep going back to the Vampire the Requiem Chronicle because I think it's a good example of a setup I've used before, and again, it tells you something about the way the city is run. I mentioned before it's set in Las Vegas, which is pertinent here because it doesn't have a primogen council. All the covenants from Vampire the Requiem are represented in this chronicle, but rather than having a primogen, they each have what is called a red chipper. A little like a blue chipper in the sense that someone is an up-and-coming star or someone is representative of a blue chip company, they're very, very successful. The red chippers, in poker terms, they are vampires who are the most influential from their covenants, to the point that they are situated in each of them in one of the major casinos of the Strip in Las Vegas. They may not have any interest in gambling, they may not be siphoning off money, but they are almost awarded a palace, one of these casinos, at least until they lose that influence, at which point a new red chipper comes in. And again, that illustrates something about the city. It illustrates that Vegas is a temporary fix. These red chippers do not hold on to their positions of power forever. They are not eternal. They last for as long as they hold influence. And so each one of them is grabbing at different spheres of influence and trying to hoard them close. We have the Lancair et Sanctum largely dominating, or at least influencing, the LVPD, the police department. And meanwhile, you have, for instance, the Ordo Dracul are very influential in the University of Nevada. So they have the academic field covered. But each one has its own sort of influence web that is only going to spread so far. And if the Circle of the Crone can start manoeuvring into that academic field the Ordo Dracul have got, they're going to start having to look elsewhere or fight for their territory. Otherwise, they're going to be moved down to a smaller casino, or a different Ordo Dracul red chip is going to be found with influence somewhere else. You also have a prince in a city like this, and in my case, the prince is purely, quite almost literally, a figurehead. He is a man or vampire in a wheelchair, torpid. Just torpid from the beginning of the Chronicle, probably torpid all the way through to the end of it. He has a seneschal and a child who acts as his mouthpiece. Whether that child actually speaks for his wishes or not, I mean, very few people could tell, because he is rolled out to the big city gatherings, of which there are few, because most of the time you deal exclusively with the head of your covenant, if you can even get through to the red chipper. Most of the time it's going to be through various envoys, messengers, heralds, and such. But if you see the prince looks like an old man, reclined, not even reclined actually, hunched over in a wheelchair, asleep, or dead, more accurately, but not reduced to ash. And that, again, tells you something. It says that Las Vegas is a city that is trying to appear to outsiders as if it has a normal setup, but is not one that necessarily adheres to its own traditions and rules, because what's the point in having a prince unless he is so powerful that there is basically the constant nuclear threat of, if something bad happens, we wake up the prince. That's probably something no one wants. It's almost like the big red button, you push it when something goes horribly wrong. So he is a constant threat. Again, these characters give a certain flavour to the city, which is hanging on by its fingertips to stability. And yeah, for as long as the prince is asleep, business can continue as usual. But if the red chippers ever break out into all-out war and start saying, no, your covenant has been kicked out of the Bellagio entirely, the Invictus no longer has a place in this city, well, maybe at that point it'll be time for one of the Invictus vampires to go and perform a ritual, feed the prince some blood, do something that is going to wake him from his torpor and see what happens. So there are two levels to populating a city. And the last thing I'll say about characters and how you build a city with them is have your NPCs be reoccurring. It's something I've mentioned long time ago, but I feel is always important. There's a reason Batman and Spider-Man are so popular, and it isn't just because the characters are interesting, it's because they have the best rogues galleries out there. Now, some may dispute that, but rogues galleries work when you can have a villain appear repeatedly and go through a different plot each time. So it gives them multiple motivations. NPCs work best like that as well. Now, not every NPC needs to appear over and over again. Far from it. But make sure you have some that do, because that will encourage your players to actually become invested in those characters. And in turn, as story guide or storyteller, you can then put that character in threat, or you can even have them succeed and want to celebrate with the player character and make them go through all the emotions of, I can't attend my best friend's wedding or his son's bris or whatever. You are basically building relationships by having NPCs turn up again and again, whether it's the flower seller who hawks her wares out on the street corner and always says good night or good evening to your character whenever they walk past, whether it's the person who runs the corner shop, the bodega at the end of your block, whether it is your landlord, your neighbour, or just that cop who seems to have a real hard-on for you and is constantly eyeballing you, pulling you over. By giving those characters a reoccurrence, you are emphasising that they are not trivial. And characters that the player characters interact with should not be trivial. They are ultimately the building blocks of your city that, given their origins, their interests, their territories, if you like, where their businesses are situated, where they live, help fill a lot of the blank spaces in your city. It's a lot more interesting for a player character to find information out through an NPC they trust or that they're interrogating than for the story guide to just sit there and deliver an exposition dump about why Junction City looks like this. No. Have the neighbour say it over a cup of coffee and a couple of cigarettes. Say, oh, I remember when this city was a much bigger deal than it is now. Back then, the steel industry was still running and thriving. And did you know, we once had the most popular theatre company in all of the Midwestern states out here, and now, of course, it moved to Chicago, because of course it did, and we're left with nothing but the dregs. There's no entertainment in the city anymore, and so on. It can be delivered however you like, but coming from the mouths of NPCs, your characters give your city character. Right. That's going to be all for now. If you want any more on how to build an accursed city of darkness by night, do comment below. And importantly, as I mentioned before, pick up one of the books I've mentioned, or get in touch via patreon.com/MatthewDawkins or MatthewDawkins.com. I would love to hear from you, and I would love your support. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.